I don't know how many people are using Protractor right now to do testing. We got one. I know the gentleman up here was using it, and I know we're using it. So Protractor is basically the new up-and-coming end-to-end test runner that the AngularJS team has put out. It's based on WebDriver JS and Selenium. And one of the things that they've been talking about and pushing is using page objects to simplify your tests. So just kind of go over this. We did a whole thing about using Protractor, oh God, I guess it's been about 6 months ago. And it's actually out on YouTube, but we dug through doing end-to-end test and how you set everything up and install it. So I just wanted to kind of, we never touched on this in the past, so I figured I'd do it. So a page object really models the objects or elements on the page that's under test. So you got properties that actually wrap the page elements. So you can have username, password, logon button, and those actually will wrap element find by, or by ID or element by model. And you can also have methods so that you can chain a bunch of things together, so like a get to go out and navigate to the website. So that what you're dealing with then is you have an object and you'll say login page dot go or get, and then username dot send keys and what you want, and password send keys. So it simplifies your test suites because you've basically encapsulated all the find by element or find by CSS and wait for Angular in a smaller object. And then you're reusing that over and over and over. So wherever you want a login page, or you need to deal with the login page, all you do is you require this in your project. Matter of fact, here's an example of a page object right now. So, and this uses the CommonJS module export that you use for Node.js. So you define your class, and then at the bottom you do module.exports equals new and your JavaScript object or instance. So what we're doing here is we've defined a bunch of different properties. Username, which is actually will resolve to element, find by input, and then the field. Same thing with password, and login button is by CSS. We're looking for a button with ng-click equals login. And then we're looking for greeting here, which is by binding. We're looking for like current brewer.firstname. And then a Gravatar image. So that's how you define a page object, and you can do all sorts of things in them. But what that resolves to then is when we're writing our test, up here at the top, we'll use require and where the page is, and then we'll do login page dot register button dot click, or login page dot username dot send keys. So what we're doing is we've taken all that stuff, element by input, we've encapsulated that back here so that we're not cutting and pasting it all throughout our objects or our tests. We're basically, we put it back here in the back, and then we treat it like an object or an instance to where we're just login page dot do this or do that. And what another good thing it makes this is if for some reason we change, just say, the binding on username to email, we can just come over here and say login.email, fix it in one place, and then everywhere where we're using that login object across all your tests, it's already taken care of. So this helps simplify and make your end-to-end test a lot more modular, and makes it a lot easier. Because what you could do is you get somebody that may not be really good at dealing with WebDriver JS and the core of Protractor, but they can do things like this. Oh, okay, it should navigate to register page. So login page dot navigate, and then check to see if it's there. You can simplify it like that. A lot easier for them. Yes?
Question for you. On our page object, sometimes we would like for a login page, we would include a method that would, like login, that would take parameters, username, password, that would actually do that for you. Do you care to comment on that approach?
Actually, that actually even makes it so you having parameters on your objects, and I don't have one here, but let's go over here to, yeah, that's where I wanted to be. I think register page has one. So this one here's got a very simple one like get. But what we could do is we could do this. We could take that whole login piece, right? And we'll do this.login. And we're going to take username, password. I'm sorry, that's got to be function here first. Now, I'm going to just go over here to my login scenario, and I'm going to just grab these guys here, right? Because to me, this actually even simplifies it even more, and it's better this way. Because how many times do you write a login function? You know, a lot of times if you're testing stuff, you always want to start your test where they're logged out and they log in as part of their test. So that's a lot of redundant code. So that's actually even better. And then we'll put password here. So I guess my response to the question is this a better way of doing this than not having those methods? This is a much better way. Setting up parameters on your page objects, passing them in, because what I just did is I just refactored all this 4 lines of code to login page dot login. And then, what was it, test underscore user, comma, ABC, or ABC123. Oh, we got an extra one here. Thank you. The editor is smarter than I am. Oh, come on. Okay, so we just basically got rid of 4 lines of code. I can take this one here, and guess what happens now? I can get rid of that in every one of these tests.
There's even one more way. You need to log in with the same users for every single test.
You can actually provide it as a parameter data, right?
Yeah, on the protector configuration, there's a method that's executed before anything is tested. It's called onPrepare. You can put in your login there, and it will execute it for every single test that you run.
Yeah. But
could you even go one step further and make those parameters like from a model of some sort?
yes, you can.
Bring it from a spreadsheet or something?
Yeah. So yes, the question is can I take these parameters and pull them out of a database or something? This is a Node application. So whatever you can do in a Node.js application, whether you want to go to Mongo, and let's say you want to go and hit Mongo and you want to pull back a list of users, and let's say that the scenario is I got 25 users and 5 of those should fail, and they should fail for different reasons, and you're testing that. You could basically go out, make that query to Mongo, and then do a for next loop and run through this login page dot login, and then expect and then wrap that in a try catch, and this one should fail, that one shouldn't fail. So you could do that as well. So you can make it even simpler. Yes.
Also, in the login routine, I noticed you had a wait for Angular call.
Yeah, I did that because I'm actually going to another page, and it's got some stuff in the background. But yeah, so I've got the wait for Angular call here, and I do that anytime when I'm gonna. So the way I found it works best for me, and I say for me because this is. Whenever I click on a button that is actually going to go off and do some background interaction, whether it goes out to like mongolab.com or it runs to a server, and it's going to end up in a redirect to another view, I always put a browser wait for Angular. Now, and that's just because I've ran into problems where I've stubbed my toes. And if I don't do that, it's on looking for stuff and it never finds the page because the page doesn't come back fast enough.
So this does not return until all the Angular processing has been completed.
That's correct. So what's going to happen now on this .login, when we go back over here to this login scenario, is he's going to call this login. And once the page and the whole login scenario has completed, and we're back at the home page where that logged in user is supposed to be, then this is actually should succeed, because that element, the login page .greeting, should actually be on the screen and should already be rendered by that time. And I don't, how many people are familiar with the WebDriver JS pipeline, but what it does is every one of these lines actually gets translated into a promise and put on a queue. And so, and it changed the promises over one behind the other. So that's why like browser.get, you know, that actually is going to put a promise on there. So if I did something like, if I didn't do the expect here, but I took login page greeting.text and said put that over someplace, and then did an expect after it, it's very likely that this is not, that promise is not going to resolve. So if I took this out, and let me do it this way, Command X here, we're going to say var value equals that, and then we say expect value to contain. This is actually more likely to fail because this promise may not resolve in time when this one is actually before that one is executed. So what happens is value is undefined at that point, and so it blows up. And that's the biggest mistake people make when they're writing their these tests, is that they forget about the fact that that's a promise and you got to wait for that to resolve. So by taking this and moving it to either a .then, and you pass in your function value, and then you do your expect, or you put your expect, you put the text in here. Yeah, oh, sorry, here, let me get this right. So if I take this here, and I'm going to get rid of the var value in just a second. So we do that. And you can do it. This is safe because what's going to happen is it's going to do get text, and when that promise resolves, it's going to pass you the value of the get text method into the callback function, right? And then you can guarantee that that's valid.
Excuse me, what if the login page reading is not ready by that time?
Okay, so you'll get one of two things. Either it doesn't exist, or it couldn't find it. So and actually I guess that's two the same, but it could be that, let's say there's some big long process going on in the background and it takes, the default timeout is like 10 or 11 seconds, which I think we talked about earlier tonight. It could take 25 seconds, and so that page never finishes rendering. You're going to get a timeout because it basically exceeded the timeout limit of your test, unless you change your timeouts.
But at least the wait for Angular,
that's good.
that in there will, as long as it renders within 11 seconds, whatever the default timeout is, you should be okay.
Yeah. And I think even that, the wait for Angular, and I'd have to go back and double check, but as long as Angular is busy doing stuff, and this is why they say don't use timeout, use set interval instead. And there was another one, I can't remember, but because that never stops the digest cycle, because timeout is just constantly going to keep it, so that wait for Angular is never going to say, hey, I'm done doing stuff. So it's going to think that Angular is just going on forever and ever, and you're going to get a test that just stalls. So that's why they always say use like set interval, and I think there was one other one that you wanted to be careful about using in your services. Because basically the timeout, since all it does is it keeps going and going and going until you kill that handle that comes back, is not really a good thing. It's better to do set interval, because what's going to happen is that only executes once, and then you've got to call it again, right? And so that works a little bit better. It's like a one-shot timer versus a continuous loop.
Even on my application, I was doing a prototype, I had to stop using, well, I had to do an apply
Yeah.
get it to force it to render back to the screen, even with the interval.
Yeah.
Right, the timeout, I went through that path. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and another good example where you run into that problem with tests like that and timeout is the photo slider, the carousel. It uses timeout, or it used to, and that used to hang my NG scenarios all up, and I couldn't understand why they had that. That timeout, the $ timeout would just hang, the Karma runner, an NG scenario. So I was going to show you a couple other examples here. So like this is the register page, and again, we're encapsulating all the elements that we want to interact with on the page by setting up methods or properties for them. And then I just added this very simple function to get, which would basically navigate to the register page. Now, let me change my protractor configuration so that we're not using this. Oh, it is on. Okay. And this actually, I just wanted to go through my specs here real quick. So I've got basically about 5 or 6 different, very simple. It should show a list. It should have a class. This should have a class on it. The logged in scenario goes through and checks to see if the front page changes. And see, in this one here, I could basically go back and change this. So now I just wrote that the login page, so we could go through here and change this and get rid of all that. And the way I would do that to use it is I would again go in here and say var login page, right, equals require. And then in here we're going to put its path relative from where you're executing it. Since this is down in scenarios, I got to go back up to my support folder, which is where I put all my page objects up here, up at a higher level. So I'm going to do / support / login page. And I think that's, I can't spell login. JS. And so that's going to actually instantiate that object for me. So now I can go ahead and I can take this here and we can get rid of all this, right? And I can now take and use this, and we can say login page dot login, and then it was test underscore user ABC 123, and that's basically how you, once you've refactored out, you can just go through all your stuff and do that.
So, really quick note. So, for Angular, that may be from an older version. There should be no need for it right now. It's actually protractor wraps around the element finder for WebDriver.js, and before it actually delegates to the WebDriver, it executes wait for Angular itself. So every time you're trying to do anything with Angular sites, it will run Angular, wait for Angular on every single command that you're trying to find bindings or computers or anything.
Well, and that's a good point, because this actually, so these tests I wrote 6 months ago when we did the first Angular one, the protractor one, and I've converted them like in the last week just to move them over so that we would actually be running on the latest protractor. But the thing is if you haven't looked at protractor in the last 2-3 months at least, it has significantly changed and gotten much better. The verbosity has been dropped dramatically, because they've actually, instead of, used to do ptor, you get an instance, and then ptor.do this, and ptor by CSS and stuff like that. And it made it really, really verbose, and now it's down, they provide you like element, browser, what was the other one that they added too? Driver, yeah. And so a lot of that encapsulates all that. And then the other thing is they got rid of all the protractor by, and the by is actually another wrapper around protractor.by.css. So it wraps all that. So it significantly simplifies things. So now let's see. Let me go ahead and let me start things up here. So let me start my web server. That's one thing I love about WebStorm is the fact that once you set up all the different node things, you know, you've got this nice handy drop down. You don't have to remember all the command lines, and just it sets up the launchers. So in the first one, I basically launched the node script, node webserver.js, which is just a very simple basic web server. And the second one, I just launched the standalone Selenium server. And now the next one I'm going to drop is run my protractor test. So what should happen when this kicks off, unless he's actually using, I'm pointing at the wrong, it should actually be using, I bet you he's actually, oh, it's actually running it as Phantom.js. I got to find out why he's doing that. I probably am pointing to the wrong config. But what it's doing is in the background, Phantom.js is going out and executing each one of those lines. And here you can see what it's actually doing in the background. It's like Angular element dot ingest, injector get, browser, and then notify when no outstanding request callback. So, you know, basically, either I've hung everything up or my mouse has died on me. Well, I guess I hung everything. I will run it again. What happened? I wanted to see my test, but I will stop it and I'll start it again. Maybe I won't. I've got something going on. I just don't know what happened. Something's running like crazy on the background. All right, well, we'll stop there. Any other questions around page objects or what they're good for or anything? All right.